My brother called me useless for being a janitor, so I bought his business. After it went bankrupt and fired him in front of everyone. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and for most of my life, my older brother made sure I never forgot my place. Ethan's 3 years older than me, but he spent his entire life acting like it's 30. He runs a construction company, drives a brand new truck, and loves flashing his success like it's proof that he's the superior son. Me, I'm a janitor at a local high school. Not glamorous, not flashy, but honest work. The smell of disinfectant, the echo of my mop gliding across the hallway floor. It's my quiet space, far away from his noise. At family dinners, Ethan always found a way to remind everyone who he was and who I wasn't. "You still cleaning toilets, little bro?" He'd laugh, spearing a piece of steak with that smug grin. My mom would chuckle nervously. My dad would say something like, "You could learn a thing or two from your brother's son." I'd nod, forcing a smile, pretending it didn't bother me. But inside, it burned the kind of slow burn that starts small and grows until it's the only thing you feel. Sometimes I'd replay his words when I was cleaning classrooms late at night. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I emptied trash cans, thinking about how no one ever noticed what I did until something was dirty. That's how I felt at home too, invisible until I made a mistake. Ethan had everyone fooled into believing he was the hardworking one, when in reality, I was the one picking up after other people's messes, including his. I told myself I didn't need to impress anyone, that respect didn't come from money or titles. But when I saw my parents beam at him like he hung the stars, I couldn't help but wonder if I was wrong. Deep down, his words stuck like glass in my chest. Family dinners always felt like performances, and Ethan was the star. He'd show up in his polished shoes, smell like expensive cologne, and start every meal with a new brag. "Closed another deal today," he'd announce, like he was waiting for applause. My parents would light up, Mom gushing about how proud she was, Dad pouring him an extra drink like he'd earned it. I'd sit there, quietly eating, pretending not to hear the subtle digs that always followed. "So, how's the school janitor life treating you?" Ethan once asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. My fork froze mid-air. He smirked, leaned back in his chair, and said, "Hey, someone's got to clean up after real workers, right?" My mother laughed nervously, muttering, "Ethan, stop teasing," but she didn't mean it. My father just shook his head and said, "He's not wrong, son. You could do more with your life if you really tried." That night, I barely tasted the food. The sound of their laughter lingered long after I left the table. Outside, the air was cool and sharp, and I could see my reflection in the car window, tired, dull, defeated. I remember thinking, why do I keep showing up just to be humiliated? But some part of me still hoped they'd see me differently one day. The next morning at work, I caught myself scrubbing a stubborn stain off the floor with unnecessary force, replaying Ethan's words in my head. Useless, lazy, small. Each word was a bruise that never healed. My coworkers treated me with more respect than my own family ever did, and that realization cut deeper than I expected. That was the day something shifted inside me quietly, almost imperceptibly. I decided I wouldn't take it anymore. Not this time. Ethan's business started booming, and with every new contract, his ego inflated a little more. He'd post pictures online of himself shaking hands with clients, standing beside brand new machinery. Captioned with things like, "Hustle harder, winners don't sleep." Every comment from family or friends fed his ego. And I'd scroll past them quietly, feeling that familiar sting of inadequacy. At home, my parents would say, "You should be more like your brother. He's really making something of himself." It didn't matter that I was paying half their bills while they were bragging about Ethan's new truck. One Friday night, I stopped by his office to drop off a package that got mailed to my address by mistake. His staff looked busy, papers everywhere, phones ringing. I remember one of the workers whispering, "He's cutting corners again. This project's gonna bite us." I didn't think much of it then. When I entered his office, Ethan leaned back in his leather chair and smirked. "Didn't expect to see you here, janitor boy. Floor's not dirty enough tonight." I wanted to leave, but something in his tone made me stay. "This came to my place," I said, setting the envelope down. "Figured you'd need it." He barely glanced at it before saying, "Appreciated. You ever want to stop mopping floors, maybe I'll hire you to clean the site toilets. Family discount." He laughed. His assistant joined in. My stomach twisted, but I just nodded and walked out. A week later, I saw his company's name flash across the local news. A construction site collapse, faulty materials, unpaid permits, and workers injured. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. My brother's empire, the one built on arrogance and shortcuts, was starting to crack. And for the first time, I didn't feel pity. I felt something darker creeping in. Something that whispered, maybe it's finally his turn to clean up the mess. The news report didn't ruin Ethan overnight, but it left a stain that wouldn't wash out easily. He brushed it off when I called to check in, acting like it was nothing more than a competitor's smear campaign. "You think a few bad reviews will touch me?" he said over the phone, his voice full of that same entitled confidence. "They'll be begging for my business again in a month." I could hear the clinking of ice in his glass, the sound of someone too comfortable to see the edge coming. But something shifted in me after that call. I stopped feeling small. Watching him dodge accountability while innocent people suffered made me realize how fragile his success really was. That week, I started staying up late after work, not cleaning, but studying. I enrolled in online night classes for maintenance management and small business operations. I didn't tell anyone, not even my coworkers. My days were still spent scrubbing floors and polishing windows. But my nights were filled with lessons about budgeting, contracts, and leadership. It felt good, like I was quietly sharpening a blade. Meanwhile, Ethan's behavior grew worse. He started blaming everyone else, employees, suppliers, even our parents, for his problems. Dad still defended him, saying, "Your brother's just under stress. Big men deal with big challenges." I didn't argue. I just nodded and took another mental note of how deeply denial ran in our family. One night, as I sat reviewing spreadsheets in my small apartment, I realized something important. Ethan's business wasn't built on skill. It was built on shortcuts, charm, and pride. The kind of foundation that eventually collapses, no matter how shiny it looks from the outside. I didn't know it yet, but that realization was the first seed of karma, and it was already taking root. It started slow, a few clients backing out, a couple of workers quitting without notice. Then the whispers started spreading through town. Unpaid wages, faulty materials, and half-finished projects abandoned midway. I'd hear it in passing at the grocery store or see it on local Facebook groups. Ethan's company isn't what it used to be. He's scamming. People, his workers, haven't been paid in weeks. Each rumor hit me like dossier vu. Man who used to mock me for mopping floors was now drowning in the dirt he'd created. At dinner one night, Dad sighed and said, "Your brother's just having a rough patch." I didn't reply, but Mom looked worried for once. "Maybe he needs help," she said softly. Ethan walked in halfway through the meal, sunglasses on indoors, clearly hungover. He reeked of expensive cologne, trying to mask the smell of alcohol. "Rough patch," he scoffed. "I'm fine. Just a few setbacks." He turned to me, that same condescending grin spreading across his face. "Don't look so smug, little bro. You'll die cleaning toilets while I'm back on top." For a second, I almost said something, almost told him that arrogance was the reason people were leaving him. But I didn't. I just smiled and said quietly, "We'll see." The words slipped out calm, almost casual, but they hit him harder than I expected. His grin faltered for half a second. Later that night, I passed his office on my way home and saw the lights still on. Through the window, he sat alone at his desk, papers scattered everywhere, his phone lighting up with calls he didn't answer. I stood there for a moment, watching him. For the first time in my life, he looked small. I didn't know it then, but his empire was already crumbling. I'd be the one standing where he used to. 2 months after that dinner, Ethan's downfall became public. The lawsuit hit like a thunderclap. 3 clients banded together, suing him for fraud and negligence. Overnight, his company's name was plastered across local news and online forums. Equipment was seized, workers walked off, and creditors circled like vultures. He vanished for a while. No calls, no updates, nothing. My parents were in shock. "It's not fair," Mom kept repeating. "He worked so hard." I stayed silent, remembering how hard he'd laughed when I said I liked my janitor job. Then one morning, while I was cleaning the teacher's lounge, I overheard 2 contractors talking about Ethan's bankruptcy auction. They're liquidating everything: trucks, tools, the whole company name, one of them said. My mop froze midair. Something inside me stirred, a feeling halfway between curiosity and fate. That night, I went home and pulled up the public records. There it was, Ethan Mason Construction. Assets for sale. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart pounding. At first, I thought it was ridiculous. I didn't have Ethan's money or connections. But then I remembered all those nights studying contracts and budgeting, learning how real businesses operated the right way. I had something Ethan never had: discipline and humility. A week later, I sat in a small office at a local bank, hands shaking as I signed a loan agreement. My savings, every extra shift, every overtime hour, all of it went into that deal. I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents. Within a month, the paperwork cleared. The company name was gone, but the assets were mine under a new banner. Quietly reborn. I didn't buy it to destroy Ethan. I bought it because I finally could. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. It had been nearly a year since I'd taken over Ethan's former business. The company was thriving now. Clean reputation, loyal workers, steady contracts. I treated everyone with respect, made sure they got paid on time, and never cut corners. The janitor in me never died. I still walked the work sites at dusk, making sure everything was spotless before we wrapped for the day. Success felt quiet, peaceful, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way forever. It started with a text from Mom. "Please come to dinner. Your brother's going through a hard time." I almost ignored it, but something told me to go. When I walked into the house, the smell of roast chicken filled the air. A cheap attempt at normalcy. Ethan was there, sitting at the table in a wrinkled shirt, eyes bloodshot. The man who once strutted around in tailored suits now looked hollow. He tried to smile. "Hey, little bro," he muttered. "Long time." His voice cracked halfway through. "Our parents fussed over him like a wounded child. He just needs time to get back on his feet," Dad said. I didn't respond. I just studied the man across from me, the man who'd once called me useless. Dinner was awkward. Ethan kept talking about potential business opportunities and new deals coming soon, but his eyes told another story. Desperation. Halfway through dessert, he sighed and said, "It's just temporary. I'll bounce back." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Actually, I applied for a management job at this new construction firm. They're hiring fast." I felt my heart drop and then twist, because I knew exactly which company he was talking about. My company? I didn't say a word. I just sipped my water, nodded, and let the silence stretch. He had no idea he was about to walk straight into the lesson. Life had been saving for him. A week later, my assistant knocked on my office door with a puzzled look. "We have a walk-in applicant for the site supervisor position," she said. "Names? Ethan Mason." For a moment, I thought I misheard her. My brother's name hit the air like static, electric, and absurd. I felt my pulse quicken, not from anger, but from the surreal irony of it all. "Send him in," I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. I straightened my tie, looked around the office, the framed contracts, the company logo gleaming on the wall. Everything in that room was something I built from the ashes of his arrogance. The door opened, and there he was. Ethan froze in the doorway, his confidence evaporating the second he saw me behind the desk. His hair was unkempt, his eyes dull, his once expensive shoes scuffed to the sole. For the first time in my life, he looked like the smaller brother. He breathed out almost a whisper. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone neutral. "Please, have a seat." He hesitated, glancing around, realizing where he was, the office that used to be his. Now redesigned and reimagined under my name. I didn't know," he muttered, voice trembling. I nodded slowly. "Most people don't. That's kind of the point." He tried to recover, laughing nervously. "Hey man, it's been rough lately. Just looking for something temporary, until I get back on my feet." I studied him for a long moment, letting the weight of silence press down. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something deeper, recognition, the same humiliation. He once fed me, now stared him in the face, and I wasn't done yet. Ethan shifted in his chair, tugging at his collar like the air had turned heavy. "Listen, man," he started, forcing a laugh. "This is awkward, huh? You behind the desk, me applying for a job. Life's got a sense of humor." I didn't laugh. I leaned forward, hands folded, letting the silence stretch until his smile faltered. "So," I said evenly, "you're applying for a site supervisor position." He nodded quickly. "Yeah, yeah, temporary thing. I've got experience running crews, managing budgets, quality control, all that." He tried to sound confident, but his voice cracked around the edges. I flipped through his resume. Half the projects listed were the same ones that led to his company's collapse. I looked up. "You left out the part where you were sued for negligence." His jaw tightened. "That was exaggerated," he muttered. "Everyone cuts corners." I leaned back, feeling the weight of every insult he'd ever thrown at me. The nights he'd called me useless. The dinners where he turned my life into a punchline. And now, here he was, hat in hand, asking me for work in the company I built from the scraps of his downfall. "Ethan," I said quietly, "we're looking for people who respect hard work. People who don't think cleaning up after others makes them less." He looked confused at first, then his face paled as the meaning hit. "Wait," he said, his voice trembling. "You're not seriously." I stood up slowly, extending my hand just like he used to when he wanted to show power. "I appreciate you coming in," I said, voice steady, "but you're not what we're looking for." He didn't take my hand. He just stared, hollow-eyed as I nodded toward the door. "You're dismissed." The words hung in the air like justice, served cold, quiet, clean, and final. A few employees had overheard what happened in the office, and by the next day, the entire site knew. They didn't mock Ethan. They didn't have to. The silence that followed his humiliation spoke louder than any laughter could. By the time I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with messages from old acquaintances. "Heard what you did, man. Poetic justice." Guess karma finally clocked in. I didn't respond to any of them, because the truth was, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, sitting alone in my truck. I thought about all those nights when I used to dream of moments like this, of Ethan finally feeling what I'd felt. But when it actually happened, there was no satisfaction, just a strange, quiet ache. Maybe because I finally realized how small his world had always been, built on ego, not love. Mom called that evening, her voice trembling. "Ethan told me what happened," she said softly. "You humiliated your brother." I closed my eyes. "He humiliated himself. Mom, I just didn't stop him." There was a long pause. "You've changed," she said. I smiled bitterly. Yeah, I finally learned to stand up. Days turned into weeks. Ethan stopped showing up anywhere. Dad barely mentioned him anymore, maybe too ashamed to admit who his golden son had become. Meanwhile, my company kept growing. I hired more staff, expanded contracts, and for once, people respected me, not because of what I owned, but because of how I treated them. I wasn't the janitor cleaning up after someone else's mistakes anymore. I was the man who built something honest from the wreckage. And that was enough. Months passed before I saw Ethan again. It was a gray afternoon, light rain tapping against my office window. My assistant buzzed in and said quietly, "There's someone here asking to speak with you." When I looked up, Ethan stood in the doorway, thinner, quieter, almost unrecognizable. Gone was the swagger, the arrogance, the expensive suit. He just looked human. He didn't sit until I gestured for him to. "I came to say thank you." "For what?" I asked, wary. "For not hiring me that day," he said with a faint smile. "You could have rubbed it in worse, but you didn't." It made me realize how far I'd fallen. We talked for a while, not as enemies, not even as brothers competing for our parents' attention, but as two men who finally saw each other for who they really were. He admitted he'd been working small jobs, trying to rebuild from scratch. "It's humbling," he said. "Makes you see who you were when you thought you were untouchable." When he left, I sat there for a long time, watching the rain blur the reflection of my company's name on the glass. It hit me. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't need him to apologize or to see me as equal, because for the first time, I didn't need validation. I already had it from the people I worked with, from the life I built, and from the quiet dignity I refused to lose. A week later, I visited my old school, the one where I'd spent years as a janitor. The same halls, the same flickering lights, the same echo of my mop sliding across the floor. I found the head custodian shook his hand and said, "Thank you for reminding me that real work builds real strength." As I left, I looked back one last time and smiled. Being a janitor never made me small. It made me strong enough to sweep away everything that wasn't worth keeping.